Hi, and welcome back to Hill and Ponton's Veterans Disability Blog. I'm Natalia Joffrey, the company's COO.
And I'm attorney Ann Lynn Scott.
Today, we're going to be talking about TDIU.
Correct.
And what does that stand for?
So you'll hear, it's the same thing as IU. You'll hear IU, unemployability, TDIU, it all means the same thing, but TDIU, the long version is total disability based on individual unemployability.
Okay, why is that important?
So that's important because total disability, so 100% disabled, is the highest rating that a veteran can get either for one condition or multiple conditions combined. And the way that I use quotation marks for VA math, because the math, the way the VA combines ratings or rates conditions is not always the most straightforward. And getting to that 100% through the ratings themselves can be pretty difficult.
That's so unusual because everything with the VA is always so straightforward.
Right?
So how does that happen,
Keeping
right?
with the theme. So with TDIU or unemployability, it's kind of a more straightforward way. You can get the 100% benefits, you're considered totally disabled, but your actual rating might not be 100%.
Okay, so who can qualify for TDIU?
Any veteran with a service-connected condition who, because of that service-connected condition, cannot work. And there's a lot more into that one statement, but that just quick and easy, that's who would be entitled to it.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a little confused. And so I want to see if I'm understanding this correctly. So if you get TDIU, is that like skipping all of the other steps? Because I know that lots of times people get like 10% and then they get increased to 30 or 50, and then eventually years later they get increased to 100. Can you get approved for TDIU and skip all of those steps and you get just as much as from TDIU?
Yes. So
Okay.
if a straightforward example would be if a veteran is service connected for PTSD and their rating is 70%. They have no other conditions service connected, so their combined rating is 70%.
Okay.
If they apply for and then get granted TDIU, even if that 70% rating doesn't change, they are considered totally disabled. So that's where saying the name out, TDIU, actually kind of helps explain the situation. They're totally disabled or 100% based on their inability to work.
On their unemployability.
Correct.
If you will. And so that would then, in my mind, equate, and you let me know if this is correct, that they're going to get a benefit that would equal 100% disability.
Correct. So their monthly benefits, the compensation amount is the same amount as if their rating were 100%.
That helps. Thank you. Okay. So the benefit amount is the same for
Correct.
100% disability benefits as TDIU.
Correct. So if you're granted TDIU, just think 100%. That's it's right around $3,000 a month. There's no distinction between a veteran who's getting monthly benefits because their combined rating is 100% and a veteran who's getting TDIU benefits. Their monthly compensation amount would be the same.
Is it easier or does it take less amount of time to get TDIU than it does to get, a 10% increases or whatever?
I wouldn't say easier, but maybe more straightforward, especially with conditions such as orthopedic problems, back ratings, just the way that the VA rates those specific conditions can make it hard to get to the 100%.
Right.
Or in other cases where a veteran has multiple different conditions, the higher their combined rating gets, the harder it actually becomes to get to that 100% combined rating. So with TDIU, because though you're not dealing with the rating criteria or with the VA math, it can be more straightforward to get that 100% benefit level.
How do you make the decision then, or the distinction between, because it sounds like you're either you have to choose a path, is that correct?
You don't necessarily have to choose a path. So a lot of times I'll tell veterans, options are great. They can definitely make things more complex sometimes, but there's plenty of times where we've argued that a veteran is entitled to a 100% rating schedularly or through the rating criteria. And in addition to that, they should be considered 100% disabled because of unemployability. You wouldn't get over the 100%,
Right.
but you can make, it's kind of two bites at the apple.
Okay, all right. So I guess that's where your expertise comes into
Yes.
play, right? So you don't have to make a decision at the beginning of the claim and say, okay, this is the way we're going to prove this case. You
Right.
could be halfway in it and realize this is the way to go,
Right.
depending
And
on what you have.
With TDIU, applying for that, we oftentimes recommend putting in, there's a form that the VA requires, the 8940, you'll hear it called, as far as the regional office basically requires that to process it as an issue. This is where it can get really complicated and tricky because it technically should be considered as part of underlying claims. So if a veteran files a claim for PTSD and increased rating, the VA should also be looking at, is there evidence that the veteran can't work because of this? But we often recommend get that form in right away so that the VA there's no question that this is an issue that you want to be raised, that you feel that you can't work.
Okay, great. So how do you prove TDIU?
Similar with, medical evidence is definitely important, but TDIU is a little different in that medical evidence can establish symptoms, limitations, doctors can comment on that. And TDIU, you want the evidence to really explain, because of those symptoms and those limitations, that keeps you from working. And so some evidence that's very strong in cases, vocational experts. Social Security on that side, I believe actually as part of the claim process, they get vocational experts to review the case. The VA doesn't necessarily do that. They'll have C&P examiners comment on functional limitations, but what's really needed a lot of times to kind of tie everything together and provide a thorough explanation of the impairments that a veteran's condition causes is finding a vocational expert to review all the medical records and provide that kind of evidence.
Because you mentioned Social Security disability, which is near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
I feel compelled to ask. So if a person is receiving Social Security disability, and so that with Social Security disability, there are no percentages. There's no 10% or 30%. It is 100%, if you will. You're either approved or you're not. You're either on benefits or you're not. So if a veteran has been awarded Social Security disability benefits, does that help their claim, or could it assist in their TDIU claim?
It definitely helps. There's nothing that says the VA has to grant TDIU benefits because a veteran is on Social Security benefits as well. But it's great evidence to show the limitations, especially if they're on Social Security disability for a condition that's service connected.
Right.
That right there is, it's strong evidence.
Yeah.
Sometimes we still would recommend getting additional evidence to explain that, depending on case specifics, just why the VA is denied unemployability. But Social Security evidence is definitely helpful.
Yeah, I just feel it's important to mention, because a lot of times people lose out on benefits thinking they have to pick one over the other, that you can get Social Security disability benefits and veterans disability benefits. Now, we're not talking about SSI, which is based on income, and we're not talking about non-service connected benefits, which are also affected by income. But as far as regular disability goes, which you've worked and paid into the Social Security system for, and service-connected veterans benefits, there is not an offset. People need to know that you can apply and pursue claims for both and ultimately get both benefits.
Right, and you can, it's also important to know that even if you were denied for a Social Security claim, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get TDIU benefits through the VA. The standards are completely different.
Yeah. Since we're talking about Social Security, which normally requires you to not be working, can you work and get TDIU benefits?
So that's one of the biggest differences in how I said the standards are different.
Yeah.
Yes, you technically can still work.
Okay.
That's a very short answer to a huge question, but the VA, especially at the regional office level, treats it as very black and white. So there's going to be a lot of cases where you apply for TDIU benefits, maybe you're working, but it's part-time, or you're working and it's for a family business, some kind of sheltered environment. The regional office, a lot of times we'll see, oh, the veteran's working, moving on, deny.
Okay.
But the regulations and the law states there's more to it than that.
So it definitely introduces a significant complication into the claim.
Right.
Yeah.
So it makes it less straightforward, but not impossible by any means.
Oh, okay, good. Is TDIU permanent? I know you get that question all the time.
Yes. So similar with how the percentage ratings work, it can be permanent. It can also not be permanent. So permanent basically means the VA acknowledges that things aren't going to get better. You're not going to improve. So for TDIU, typically speaking, they kind of go hand in hand. If the VA grants TDIU benefits, they say it's permanent. There are cases where they don't say that it's permanent. A lot of times, if a veteran's been out of service for less than 5 years, age is not a factor for eligibility to TDIU, but it can sometimes be a factor as far as whether or not the VA is going to consider TDIU benefits permanent.
That's funny that you say that, because that was my next question. How does age come into play, and does it affect TDIU?
So age comes into play, like I just said, the VA regulations say that they cannot consider as a factor to determine if a veteran is eligible for the benefits.
Okay.
So a lot of times I'll get veterans calling in, prospective clients saying, well, I'm 75, of course it can't work, or, I retired because of my age. And there are definitely times when, the VA might incorrectly look at that, but the regulations say that age is not supposed to be considered a factor in determining eligibility for the benefits.
Okay. When should a person apply for benefits?
So going back to, I brought it up a little earlier in our conversation, but I recommend as early as possible. I mean, there's cases where a veteran comes to us trying to apply for service connection for PTSD, and we're handling that appeal, and we already know, well, they can't work because of PTSD. So we'll go ahead and file the evidence and the forms that the VA requires for TDIU benefits just to get the ball rolling. It's not going to get granted until conditions are service connected, but that way the VA is acknowledging it, is on notice that it's something that the veteran is ultimately going to be applying for, and sooner the better, then you don't have to remember to do it later.
Okay, good. How do they apply?
So this is another tricky, I say tricky because of how the regional office handles TDIU and what the law says. To apply for TDIU, the regional office will require the 8940, the VA form 21-8940. Sometimes they'll also require the form for new claims, the 526. But technically speaking, if there's a claim going on for service connection or increased rating for an already service connected condition, if there's evidence in the file that the veteran can't work, the VA should address the issue of TDIU on their own. It's always best, though, to just make it as clear as possible. It's the VA. I always say you have to choose your battles. So get the form in, make it clear, and then that way you're not having to rely on the VA to find that issue.
Okay. Just because it was one of my questions, no penalty, right? Going back to the Social Security and TDIU, like with any other veterans, service-connected veterans disability benefit, there's no penalty to get both.
Correct.
None. Okay. Common issues with TDIU. Concerns, what would you put
There's
out
a lot. I would say one of the issues is what I just said, how the regional office treats it versus how it really is supposed to be treated. And that's, again, they'll treat it as a separate claim when it's really supposed to be inferred with the underlying issues already on appeal. That's probably one of the biggest in that. goes to effective date as an issue. So you might find in a lot of cases the veteran files that form, the 8940, they'll get granted TDIU benefits, and the VA puts the effective date as the date that form was received. Whereas there's a lot of different regulations and rules where it should actually go further back. So we're talking about a lot of retroactive benefits that could be at stake.
And when you're referring to effective date, you're referring to what? What does effective date mean?
That is the date that the VA says a veteran is entitled to those benefits. So starting that date, they get the increased, they're being paid at 100%.
Pretty important date
Yes.
to mess, so you don't want to mess that up.
Another one is that it all kind of ties in with effective dates, but when the VA, if there's evidence in the file that the veteran's not working, the VA doesn't address it how they're supposed to, doesn't develop it the correct way. So, or when we started out talking how it's not a blanket no if a veteran's working.
Right.
Common mistake is that the VA will see a veteran is working and kind of stop looking there and just deny, where they really need to look at the circumstances of the work.
Okay, all right, great. And this was so helpful. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to call our office or visit our website. Otherwise, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks.